and a smooth transition from one collective leadership, one collective of leaders to the next. A process so deeply democratic, characteristic of the deep and proud values of the ANC and embedded in its very DNA. The leadership elected at this, the 54th National Conference, will represent that dynamic of continuity and change. A blend of seasoned cadres and leaders of our movement, and the newer and younger leaders possessing a different experience and a new outlook to political and economic issues. Whichever leadership is elected by the 54th National Conference, I am confident that they will undertake their responsibilities with the seriousness it deserves and apply themselves to their mandate in a manner commensurate with the understanding of what our people require from their leadership, fundamentally to transform our society. Whoever emerges as our president after the vote, and whichever collective is elected, I am confident that they will hold the custody of our nation and country as well as is expected of them. The country and the movement are going to be in good hands. I speak with so much confidence because I know that the presidents of the ANC represent the collective will of the members and the leadership of the movement, and implement the policies derived from the national conference and not their own personalized opinions. If I may be so bold, I would like to take this opportunity to suggest to the incoming leadership, whoever they may be, that at this defining moment, the most important task for the African National Congress as the governing party is to lead the country to achieve inclusive growth through radical economic transformation as quickly as is possible. Ours was a struggle for more than formal political democracy. Our struggle for national liberation was bound up with our economic aspirations. Ahead of us lies an entire historical period during which we must intensify the struggle to give birth to new conditions. We are called upon to discern a new path that will lead us to the fulfillment of the objective of national democratic society. Since the attainment of our freedom 23 years ago, we would be correct to say that we have successfully accomplished the political tasks associated with the first phase of the national democratic revolution. Our next challenge is to accomplish a social revolution. What cannot be disputed is that we have made enormous progress since 1994. However, despite all this progress, our country still faces extreme income inequalities, deep poverty, and very high levels of unemployment, particularly affecting the youth. These evil triplets still reflect the old race, class, and gender and geographic features of apartheid colonialism. While this has been mitigated through an expansive social wage, the fact of the matter is that our large social wage bill is as good as it can be a trap if jobs are not created so that people can be gainfully employed and freed from reliance on the state. In this regard, a call for radical socio-economic transformation is relevant. It is a stepping stone towards inclusive growth. There can be no other way forward for our country other than to recognize the social grievance of the majority and to fulfill it. Writing earlier this year about our economic discourse, Professor Stephen Friedman captures this oddity, as he termed it quite aptly, saying, I quote, "Why should it be interesting that ANC leaders say the economy needs to change radically? It is hard to think of any interest that could argue with a straight face that the economy does not need major change. It has slipped into recession after a long period of weak or non-existent growth. Much of black business and many black professionals insist they are still excluded from its engine room. Continued poverty and inequality confirm that many are denied its benefits. Given all this, supporting radical economic change should be simply a statement of the obvious." Close quote. Professor Friedman goes on to speculate provocatively as to why key economic actors are passive with regard to contributing ideas for a new economic direction, saying, I quote, "The interests who may have something to say are members of the cozy club of insiders. They all know that the economy could be a whole lot better. But since they benefit from what exists, trying to make sure that the government does not damage what they have seems less risky than opting for change. So they react to the ANC if it threatens current arrangements but do not propose something better." Close quote. Our economic discourse must transcend the fear of loss or desire to maintain current privilege. It must be courageous, generous, and creative enough to reimagine what is possible, to build an economy which works for all South Africans and not a select few. The National Development Plan commits us to pursuing growth and economic transformation. We need to do both. Growth without transformation is unjust and will further exacerbate social tensions, fissures, and instability. But transformation without growth is similarly self-defeating. If the economy does not grow, there will be no radical socio-economic transformation to speak of. Inclusive growth is required because all of our social and economic challenges will be easier to address in the context of a rapidly expanding economy. A fast-growing economy creates more opportunities for wealth and employment creation. Businesses see more demand for their products and services and invest accordingly. Workers see more job opportunities and higher wages. The government receives more tax revenues to fund social services and invest in human capabilities and economic infrastructure. Several years of low growth have threatened to derail our progress in addressing the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The credibility and sustainability of the political transition is critically dependent on the transformation of the economy away from its apartheid colonial legacy. There are two elements to this radical economic transformation. The first relates to the need to ensure that the ownership, management, and worker profile at all levels reflects the racial composition of the broader society. And the second relates to the need to transform the sectoral composition of the economy to reflect a post-apartheid industrial economy built on a large, stable, and skilled middle class, rather than a capital-intensive economy based on a minerals energy complex. Possibly one of the most crucial steps in this implementation was the decision by the ANC to build a developmental state which has the objective of actively intervening in the economy to drive investment in plant skills and technologies in targeted areas to achieve a long-term vision of a higher value-added, labor-absorptive, and racially transformed economy. In order to do this, the state needs, among others, the ability to build strategic coalitions with key players in the economy to drive this agenda of radical socio-economic transformation. Ultimately, as Chalmers Johnson states in the article, The Developmental State Odyssey of a Concept, a state's power lies in or derives from broad-based legitimacy and trust based on its achievements rather than merely how it came to power. Ultimately, as is the experience of the liberation movements across our continent, the excitement of liberation wears off, and people start asking the question, what has this state that we created achieved to change our lives? Johnson further says that the legitimacy of the leaders of a developmental state comes from people working together. The strength of a developmental state is its ability to forge a common vision for the people and to unite them behind that vision as the organizing philosophy of the nation, so that they all pull towards the same direction. This is what defined and underscored the success of the East Asian developmental states, in addition to forging strategic developmental coalitions. Right at the outset of the Chinese policy of opening up led by Deng Xiaoping, he outlined his vision in an interview in 1979 and said, I quote, "The aim of our revolution is to liberate and expand the productive forces. Without expanding the productive forces, making our country prosperous and powerful, and improving the living standards of the people, our revolution is just empty talk. We oppose the old society and the old system because they oppress the people and fettered the productive forces," close quote. Later on, he proceeded to say, "Of course, we do not want capitalism, they in China, but neither do we want to be poor under socialism," quote unquote. And this is an important phrase. We do not liberate ourselves to be poor under the new system that we are creating. The point I am making through this quote is that the new system we are building to replace apartheid colonialism must distinguish itself by its ability to expand the productive forces, make the country prosperous and powerful, and improve the living standards of the people as a whole, especially those hitherto oppressed. The Asian tigers and China have achieved this and built a powerful vision for their societies based on achievements rather than the perpetuity of dreams undergirded by rigid dogmas. We opposed apartheid colonialism not only because it was unjust and repressive, but also because by fettering the productive forces, it denied us the chance to improve the living standards of all the people. As the Chinese have proven, This is not merely a function of ideological dogmatism, but we need to be very pragmatic and engage the power of private sector capital and resourcefulness in pursuit of this goal of radical economic transformation. What the Chinese can teach those of us as executing the national democratic revolution is that the people do not eat ideologies and dogma does not achieve higher growth rates or even inclusive growth. Radical economic transformation cannot be achieved through antagonizing, marginalizing, and even maligning the private sector. We need to harness and provide leadership to private capital in pursuit of the radical economic transformation agenda. Both to get out of the current period of slow growth as well as to achieve high industrialization and inclusive growth, we need the strategic partnership with business, labor, and civil society in general. In an environment of fiscal constraints, business confidence is the cheapest form of economic stimulus. The immediate challenge is to resolve policy uncertainty by adopting and implementing growth-enabling policies. In relation to state-owned companies, particularly Eskom, we need to act decisively to address their governance, management, and financial sustainability. Before I turn to some comments on fiscal policy, I want to emphasize that the fundamental problem we face, which the incoming ANC leadership must confront, is the low growth trap we find ourselves in. Economic growth in the South African economy slowed from 3% in 2012 to 0.3% in 2016. Over the last 2 quarters, we have seen stronger economic activity, largely driven by a recovery in mining and agriculture and stronger household consumption. At the time of the medium-term budget policy statement, we expected growth of about 0.7%. Recent data suggests that economic growth could be close to 1% with further potential for upside surprise. The economy is finally growing, but it is growing slowly, just at or even below the rate of population growth, while demands on government for public services, social spending, and investment are increasing. This has increased the pressure on our fiscal framework in the form of persistent budget deficits, leading to our debt to GDP increasing steadily where we would prefer to stabilize it. A sustainable fiscal framework with stable and falling debt is not a concern merely for ratings agencies and investors. It is rather a reflection of our financial health as a country. We take our relative macroeconomic stability for granted, but it is a key asset for a developing country. Sustainable public finances give us the autonomy to decide policies without being pressured or dictated to by international lenders. We should continue zealously to guard and defend our fiscal sovereignty. We will take the necessary tough decisions to continue fiscal consolidation and the stabilization as we move towards the 2018 budget in February. This will stabilize public debt in the coming years and ensure macroeconomic stability. However, fiscal consolidation is not the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is to reignite growth. Only a return to decent growth will create the conditions to get all our citizens working, create opportunities for widely shared prosperity, and provide government with the resources to fulfill our social needs, invest in human capabilities, and appropriate social and economic infrastructure. To do that, we need to forge a coalition of all social partners for a program of inclusive growth and transformation. We need to leverage our traditional strengths of mining and agriculture. We need to nurture and expand growth sectors such as tourism, renewable energy, and oceans economy. We need to reindustrialize the economy and find niche sectors where we can be globally competitive, such as in advanced manufacturing. To do so, we need to do some difficult things. We need to address education quality and access. To make the most of our young population, we need to graduate competitive matriculants with core skills in reading and comprehension, mathematics, science, critical thinking, and problem solving. We need them to be able to access higher education and vocational training. Issues of access to higher education have been quite rightly brought to the fore by students in recent years. Quality vocational training linked to the skills needs of industry and apprenticeships opportunity is critical for building the skills and capabilities to support industrialization. This has been at the heart of Germany's industrial success, for example. It can also be at the heart of South Africa's industrial success. We need to invest in human capabilities at a massive scale. We need to improve our policy and regulatory environment. We have to do a better job of managing competing demands and imperatives among stakeholders. We cannot have policy stalemates which last for years. Government needs to move at the speed of business, not vice versa. We need to put in place the conditions to be globally competitive. We cannot have logistics costs which are higher than our developing country peers and expect to industrialize rapidly. We need to build a social compact between business and labor where workers receive a greater share of profits in exchange for higher productivity. We need to invest in knowledge and innovation to be competitive in the fourth industrial revolution and the industries of the future. We need a dynamic SME sector and venture capital environment. We need to address the trust deficit in government and the private sector. We need to fully investigate allegations of state capture and public corruption to restore citizens' trust in government. If citizens do not trust government, even worthy programs will be difficult to implement. We need to address governance failures in the private sector, especially with regards to the independence of audit firms, audit committees, and non-executive directors, and deal decisively with instances of corporate fraud and corruption. The Steinhoff saga must receive the same amount of public scrutiny as all other allegations and instances of public sector corruption. Ultimately, we need to act decisively to restore public confidence in our public and corporate leadership, as well as in our reputation as a country. In this regard, we need a united and decisive response. Not to be vocal selectively and silent in other instances when it suits us or when it's uncomfortable to be vocal. In conclusion, I would like to encourage the incoming national leadership of the African National Congress, rather than be daunted by the many challenges facing our country, to see opportunities and be resolute in uniting the movement and the nation. I would like to encourage the incoming leadership to be decisive in speedily implementing the resolutions adopted by the conference. Because in many instances, Uncertainty is created not by a difference of opinion about adopted policies, but by mere lack of implementation. Our people are hungry for change. But our people are also resilient and dynamic, and will welcome progress. All eyes are on the ANC. The country is looking to us for leadership. We dare not disappoint them. Let us grab the mantle to offer a compelling vision and forge once again a dynamic and developmental coalition of all social partners to build the South Africa we want. One that works for all who live in it. The change in leadership provides a grandiose opportunity for continuity and change. This is the moment. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are now going to start the conversation. So if I can ask you to indicate who would like to make a contribution. In doing so, if you could just, when you do get the mics will be sent to you. Just indicate who you are and what company you are representing. And if I can please ask you just to keep the question or the comment as short as possible so that we can allow more questions to be accommodated. I see one indication so far and a second. Okay, so we'll start at the table at the back there. If you can just give me an indication, anyone else so long?
Thank you. My name is Paul Upega. I'm from a company called PK Financial Consultant. Okay, my contribution here is in the form of a question. You see, when you look at the value chain in the mining and manufacturing, you find that the beneficiation of those value chains are not happening here in this country, especially the mining and the manufacturing. When the ANC is going to come with the policy of saying, look, the value chain is manipulative, let's fix it. Because this unemployment, this fiscal problem is caused partly by this value chain that create jobs in other countries out of our raw material. The second question is the gentleman from Investec, I like his discussion, it's really nice. But I disagree with him on the basis of capital outflow from the country, that the skill that was there at SARS, it allowed those money to go overseas. Now, because they have allowed those money to go overseas, now they're saying we're resigning. What a stupid decision. You allow money to go away, then when there's no money, you say, I'm leaving. Now, when you look at the OECD transfer pricing report, the OECD, especially on the mining in Africa, is telling us a very serious story to say transfer pricing compliance or transfer pricing management is so complex that even the international communities are not able to manage it. The multinational company are still busy with profit shifting to the lower jurisdiction. So we cannot then say SARS is a problem. The problem is multinational. Those people are not honest in terms of the Article 9 of what we call it tax convention. They're not honest. Because they take money that belongs to the government of those countries and they put it somewhere. So I'm saying to you, Minister, if then people are not there to implement the, let's say, the PEEP project in SARS, then employ people from overseas. While we are training our guys to be competent in terms of this tax complex, then you further put a little bit of equilibrium between the appetite of the investors and the collection of tax that is a little bit aggressive. Because the tax net should be further stretched in order to cover a little bit of fish that are not covered, so that our fiscals will be better. Thank you.
Paul, remember afterwards, the credit card machine is at the back for the second question. The table here in the middle. Can we just bring the mic quickly? Please give me indication who wants to follow.
Honourable Minister, members joining us. My name is Neil De Beer. I'm the chairman of Nadebe International and the current president of the Africa Monetary Fund based in Dubai. One is a statement, sorry, Dubai. One is a state, been there 9 years. Statement one, I don't think government should take the responsibility to change the fiscus and the attitude of this country's future. I think business should take the lead and business should help government to actually grow sustainable growth in jobs in this country. I think government should not be in business, they should help business. They should not compete with us in business. We chose to be in business because we understand it. If we don't get a sustainable job increase, and Minister, you're so right, and the gentleman from Investec, jobs and education is the future of this country. If we have illiteracy, we can't speak to our future that can become the entrepreneurs. So here's the question. Last time I stood here, we answered Minister Rob Davies' question when we were talking about white minority capital. And for 18 years, I was part of white minority capital. It's alive. I'm part of it. I'm now standing on the other side. White minority capital exists. I'm a white guy. I know it. I meet the people. So let's declare it today at this conference. It's alive. So let's not mix words here. We meet, we greet, we have lunches, and we debate. Klaar. So people like my level, we meet coffee shops and we talk rara. It's time not to see white minority capital as a negative. You have the money, what are you going to do with it? So I think hand the money back and give the people, instead of white minority capital, black majority capital. Let's go to PMC. Ons het die geld, man. Kom ons gee net die geld vir meer mense. Plain and simply, we pumped 2 billion as an entity into Africa. Yes, you can look. As an ANC member for 29 years of my life, I've come back because it's time to plow back. You want us to break monopoly and monopoly businesses in this country. Those are banking, construction, finance, agriculture, and mining. And if you want us to make black majority capital survive, then help us build construction companies that are owned by black people, funded by us, and give them the tenders so that they can compete with the big companies. So the question here, in finalization, not to pay also a credit card loan at the back, because I contribute to the PBF, is, Minister, how do we help you to sit down as industry in this country and change the monopoly attitude and not hide away from it? That is a fact. That's radical economic transformation. Let's start there instead of explaining to the people what is RET.
Yes, it's true, you do contribute, but you never gave me a clue as to how much money you had to pump in. Now I know. So we'll be having a discussion shortly. Any further question before we hand over to Minister? Minister?
Thank you for the comments. I actually don't think that there were any questions. I think that the people, the comrades who spoke, were stating their views, and I think it's a bit unfair to have to respond to their opinions since we're not in a commission. And thanks also to those who were sending me tweets and other messages on social networks, distracting me while I had to listen carefully to the comments that were being made and laughing about it because they said they could see I was reading and laughing at their comments. But I think, just starting with the issue of beneficiation, which is top on the 9-point plan, we should all agree that we need to move the mining sector in South Africa away from its heavy reliance on the minerals energy complex, commodity production and exports, to start industrializing, to develop the industrial sectors more, and through that to be able to therefore export value-added goods. You cannot say that a country which has as many minerals as we do should, even at this stage, still be focusing on what we are focusing on. But I think everybody agrees with that. So we need to move a step further. And do several things. One of those is to develop strategic partnerships that focus on minerals beneficiation, harnessing the power of the mining sector, the state-owned companies, especially Transnet and Eskom, and the development finance institutions to identify certain minerals and develop industrial sectors in South Africa that are going to beneficiate those minerals. And the provision of infrastructure should then be tailor-made to support those efforts. The provision of the mobilization of capital, the development of skills, the mobilization of technologies, because what happened with our mining sector was that for quite a long time, it didn't focus as much on developing the skills base and the industrial base that would beneficiate these minerals in the country. And so we need to harness all the capabilities that we have. So I don't agree with the view that government shouldn't be involved in business. It depends what business. I mean, surely you don't want to see government running a supermarket. Disaster. Government shouldn't be owning holiday resorts. But government should own a logistics company, a freight logistics company. Government should own an electricity utility. Perhaps not alone. And I guess that's why we are diversifying our energy resources. We are implementing an energy mix program which brings on board renewables and independent power producers. And government should, in how it thinks of Eskom, answer the question, how do we make Eskom financially sustainable? Because the present model of Eskom is certainly not financially sustainable. In actual fact, pretty soon it's going to become an AA. If people were complaining about SAA, Eskom is a much bigger risk and potentially heavier drain on the fiscus than Eskom, than SAA could ever be. 100-fold. So there are sectors to resolve certain challenges where government needs to be involved to ensure equitable access, among others, where government should be involved. But that should be done with a strategic purpose to forge developmental coalitions with business and mobilize development finance institutions in order for us to grow the economy faster and get the economy going. And that is required if we must achieve beneficiation better than how we have implemented that program up until now. But we must ensure that the mining sector grows, that mining production grows, because if mining productivity is slowing down, as we have seen during the course of this year. So if you look at at mining productivity this year and its contribution to GDP, and compare it to the past 3 years. During the past 3 years, mining contribution to GDP has been negative. But you can understand. There was global economic slowdown. There was lower demand for commodities globally. And we were hit by an enormous strike in the platinum sector just 2 years ago or 3. And all of that contributed to affecting the mining investment climate. But this year, mining productivity was higher in the first quarter. It's about 13.1%, slowed down to about 8.3% in the second quarter, and further down to 6.6% in the third quarter. You can pretty much anticipate that in the final quarter, it will even be slower than 6.6. So, agriculture is doing the heavier lifting for our economic performance alone, when mining should be equally lifting our economic performance as well as agriculture. In as much as we can celebrate that mining production has been positive this year, at least we expect that at the end of the year, its contribution to GDP will be positive. We need to acknowledge that it could have done better. And so, we are talking with Minister Zwane that we've got to resolve the stalemate between government and the mining sector so that by next year we find a resolution and get our mining sector to be working and performing better again and playing its role in uplifting our broader economic performance and gross domestic product. So if there is no mining production, if mining production is declining, we should expect that there will not be sufficient resources to beneficiate. And so we need to improve the productivity of the mining sector and ensure therefore that we have beneficiation taking place. But we need, beneficiation is not going to be driven, it's not going to drive itself. It needs to be driven by the state and government and the private sector working together, bringing on board private capital, DFIs, state-owned companies, to ensure that it actually does happen. I secondly agree that base erosion and profit shifting and illicit financial flows are everybody's responsibility. I also agree that we need to build internal capacity and resources for us successfully to combat these maladies and ensure that we can keep as much of our revenues for our fiscal needs than let them leave the country. We've put in legislation, we've developed the institutions. We now need to see these institutions achieving just two things: build internal capacity within each one of them, at SARS, the FIC, the NPA, but we also need to see them collaborating more. And by internal capacity, I'm talking both about the technologies and people. Recruiting people, training and developing people who are going to contribute to this effort. Learning from international best practice. But we need to see our institutions collaborating more with one another. A greater team effort that will also ensure that those who are suspected are investigated speedily. If they are found to be involved in illicit financial flows, they are prosecuted with speed. And our money recovered and brought back to the country with speed. Because in criminal activities of this nature, the only way you can minimize is by sending the correct, strong message that we will, once we identify or suspect, we will investigate you, working together, we will prosecute you, we will bring our money back, and ensure that in the future, you are unable to do business and to get involved in these criminal activities. And then you send the message to all others involved in the same. I think what we need as a country is to work more with one another than spend more time debating and fighting and quibbling and doing all sorts of things as if we are siblings. Ultimately, yes, we are. We are nationals of the same country. There will be moments when we fight, when we don't see eye to eye. That's okay. But I think over the last few years, we have demonstrated as a country how much we can achieve by working together. I want to believe that the work which has been put in driving the CEO's initiative has had a tremendous impact on rebuilding the confidence, albeit slowly, and it's still fragile, it's still not where we want it to be, but it's been important in getting us to sit around the table and talk. And oh yes, we do fight, we tell each other uncomfortable things, and then we turn around and say, okay, having done all of that, this is what's important, let's get it done. I think that we need to do more of those, but we need to go beyond that, to focus on big projects and get them going. The only way you can industrialize South Africa is by building developmental coalitions with business. To go ahead to implement the minimum wage agreement and to do what I was suggesting, ensuring that workers share in the profits of companies, and in return, they improve their productivity so that the economy grows, because nobody eats dogma, nobody eats fighting. And the economy will not grow if all we spent our time doing was to prove to one another how intransigent each one of us can be. We need to get the economy going, and that should be our primary focus. And that's why I was saying from the outset that the most important task for the incoming leadership of the African National Congress is the economy. All other things, I'm not saying they're not important, I'm saying all other things are dependent on the economy growing faster, becoming inclusive, and ensuring that we create employment and prosperity for the whole country. And I think the Chinese leader he outlined the task very simply. Expand the productive forces, grow the economy, make it prosperous, and make China powerful. And ensure that everybody benefits from it, uplift the standards of living of the Chinese people. It's a simple message for us too. And to achieve that, you need to work together. Yeah, we will fight, it's okay. But I think what I'm calling for right now is not just unity, but it's united action. The vision is there. The NDP outlines what we need to do. We now need united action to achieve that vision. To resolve the structural impediments to our economic growth. To reform our state-owned companies and ensure that they become financially sustainable, to improve their governance and management. To uplift our skills base and ensure higher productivity that will improve economic performance. I think that also in part is how you will change what has been referred to as white monopoly capital. In addition to which, we need to continue implementing, supporting the Competition Commission in deconcentrating, because what you call monopoly in the capital doesn't only affect black people who are excluded. It also speaks to the fact that by 1994, only 4 mining companies, mining houses owned the majority of the South African economy. Almost every aspect of our lives were affected by just these 4 companies. The economy will not grow if we do not deconcentrate it. To ensure we reduce the barriers to entry for new aspiring entrants. Because even if you were to implement your procurement reforms in government, you still would face enormous impediments if your small businesses were confronted by monopolies and oligopolies in the economy. And so even as we say, even as we continue to debate about whether it's white monopoly capital or not white monopoly capital, but the fact of the matter is that the monopoly capital in the country needs to be deconcentrated. And all of us need to become participants. There are many small players who wish to participate in the financial services sector, in every other sector in the country. The only way they can access those sectors is by us deconcentrating all of these. And the Competition Commission plays a significant role in that regard. But ultimately, as we deconcentrate, we must grow the economy. I don't think when we sit at Treasury and talk about the levels of growth, I was saying to the President recently that the potential growth level of the South African economy is not the 2% we achieve every quarter. It's not the 1% we are earmarking at the end of this year. It potentially could, by the end of the year, would have grown by above 2% if we implemented structural reforms and SOE reforms. If we did just those. If we took a decision about how to make Eskom financially sustainable to reduce their debt level, because I can already anticipate the challenge that Eskom will be facing with the decision that NERSA took. And I support the decision. Because there was no way you were going to give Eskom a 20% increase in an environment of low demand and slow growth. But the problem that Eskom will say to us they are facing is, we are financially unsustainable. We have got a huge debt, which we view as a risk to government. They have a huge debt, and they've got a build program to complete, and a significant share of the new integrated energy plan to participate in. So how do they implement it? Because we can't take a decision as the shareholder about the financial sustainability of Eskom. We then shift the responsibility to NERSA to decide whether they give ESCOM the 20% increase they want or not. We shift the responsibility to ESCOM to apply for a higher tariff because they need to become sustainable. And had that been done, that responsibility, that burden would have been shifted onto the consumer. But this is not a consumer problem. It's not a regulator problem. It surely is in some ways not an ESCOM problem. It is the shareholder problem. The shareholder must take correct decisions about ESCOM right throughout the value chain of the company. And I think we could do better than we have done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are sort of moving towards our deadline. Can I take it that, you see, now we come. Any further questions? Okay, let's keep it at those last three. We've got about 20 minutes left, so if we can do a quick question and quick response. Let's start over on my left-hand side. The mic, please. There we are.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Thank you, Minister. We welcome your views on a developmental state. A developmental state presupposes well-run state-owned enterprises like ESCOM. It would be nice, Minister, if, like you said, we have not gone far enough at ESCOM, if there could be drastic action taken against wrongdoers at ESCOM. That would be a good start. It would give confidence to business. And secondly, there needs to be coordination, Mr. Minister, on how government works. The economy is now growing, but you have the Minister of Water Affairs saying, I'm going to shut down water for municipalities. How are you going to do manufacturing? You know, this comes shortly after ESCOM then also switched off electricity for municipalities. I mean, productivity, how is that going to happen? How are you going to do manufacturing when, even if you shut down after 5, look, certain companies operate around the clock. The infrastructure of the municipality is so weak that once it's switched off, when they switch on, not everything is working. So we have a government-owned goal, you know. So I think it's about time the Minister of Finance was given more powers, especially at a strategic level. Not that he must supervise DPE and water affairs, but there needs to be coordination. The ideas he's coming with are very brilliant, but there's an own goal here. Who's going to open a factory in a town where water is going to be shut down? Who's going to open a factory or continue to invest in a town where electricity is going to be switched off? All right, let's think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This front middle table, please, Anderson.
Colin Coleman, Business Leadership South Africa. I want us not to lose the opportunity to congratulate the Minister, because I thought the analysis he gave in his speech was quite an outstanding analysis of the interplay between the need for transformation, growth, and unleashing productivity, human capital productivity and working productivity in the economy. So I'd like us to congratulate the Minister for that analysis and give him a round of applause firstly. Secondly, I think what the Minister said about populist dogma is very true, and we should avoid the populist dogma slogans about the economy. I think the good news is that actually if we all work together in a social compact between business, government and labour going forward, there's some basic things we have to do, and the Minister has mentioned some of them. Fixing the state-owned enterprises. ESCOM is clearly the biggest single issue in the state-owned enterprise realm to fix. Secondly, we have to fix basic issues surrounding regulation, surrounding the climate for doing business and attracting investment. And if we do those simple things, we will attract fixed direct investment, we will attract institutional investors into the economy, and growing at below population growth is nothing to crow about. We are really a 3% style economy in terms of growth. That's a 2 plus 1% real economic growth, 2% population growth plus 1% economic growth opportunity. For us to get back to in the short term, we should be growing at 3%. That's where, by doing the basic things right, we can get. And with proper articulation and proper performance across all the sectors, we can grow that to 5%. So let's put that out as the target to get there. Everybody's going to feel a lot better about a growing cake than fighting over a pie that's shrinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Last quick question at the back. Just indicate again. There it is, yeah. Last quick question. Just indicate to the mic.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the Minister. I just have one question. You speak a lot about policy coherence and policy certainty, and this is raised a lot. I just want to find out, when we talk policy certainty, which one are we referring to? Are we referring to ANC policy certainty or government policy certainty? Here's the reason why I ask. You find a policy position of the ANC on a particular issue that is very clear, but government policy contradicts ANC policy. In making investment decisions, which policy directive ought business take into account? And I think this comes back to the very necessity of a gathering such as this one, where the ANC seeks to build or bring business into its confidence about its own policy direction. So to what extent should then the ANC policy direction be taken seriously, where at government the implementation may differ? I'll give an example. The ANC policy conference this year takes a decision around a number of taxes, sugar tax, carbon tax, and so on, that further studies and investigations ought to be done before government implements. But then on the other side, government implements the taxes, which then discourage investment, and businesses are holding back. They are going to retrench, undermining the whole drive of economic growth as well as job creation. There seems to be a contradiction and no coherence as far as the movement that you are talking about, Minister, that let's move together towards a common destination. But the actions in between don't seem to be supporting that notion.
Thank you very much. Minister, given the time constraints, a quick round.
Thank you very much. Well, I agree with the first comment about what we need to do at ESCOM. I think we all know what we need to do at ESCOM. And the sooner we can take it, the more the DG here, Dondo, and I can rest at night knowing that the risk that ESCOM is to the government finances is mitigated. I think we've had a difficult year or two of taking difficult, unacceptable decisions that we need to deal with. It's important that we restore confidence, not only of the lenders and investors and ratings agencies, but also the confidence of the public that their state-owned companies are being run properly. And so we can, so that even when they have to pay their tariffs, they do so with open hearts. Generally, I think everywhere we need to run our institutions properly, to put the best people forward. That's why at the MTBPS, I made the statement that state-owned companies pay very well. They remunerate very well, and they are competitive in terms of remuneration, and therefore it's correct that South Africans and government should have high expectations of the people employed there. And that's why we took the decision that we're going to stop using government guarantees as perverse incentives. So next year we're going to be introducing a new policy framework that's going to become more stringent on how government guarantees are provided, especially to provide a government guarantee for operational expenditure when the management has run an entity down and the board has either watched them doing so and not done anything or were oblivious. I think it's something that has to be dealt with so that government is not viewed as the bailer of those who are incompetent, corrupt, and so on. I also agree that there has to be coordination. You know, ultimately, the fundamental basis of a developmental state has to be that coordination of different elements of government policy so that they all work towards the same direction. I've been saying that the cluster approach in government works to some extent in making decisions to be taken collectively, but it also is difficult because when ministers come to clusters, each one comes with their item, their memorandum, they want it adopted so that they go and implement. And there isn't a place where coordination is done and we can check whether this policy being propounded here is going to be aligned with the broader developmental goals that we need to implement. I think several countries, including the MITI in Japan and other institutions that were established in other countries to ensure that there is such coordination. Several countries showed the way. In Singapore and in Turkey, what they have done is to place economic policy coordination, not cluster running. Clusters must continue doing what they do, but economic policy coordination must be placed at the presidency. That's what I would wish that in the next administration, the presidency of the country will play a greater role in coordinating economic policy formulation and implementation and driving it so that you are able to resolve a number of difficulties. On the one hand, you have the Department of Transport approving the open skies policy. On the other hand, you have the Department of Public Enterprises wanting SAA to become a viable airline. The two departments are negating one another. They're negating one another. You are opening your skies. You are allowing airlines to fly from everywhere to anywhere in South Africa, but SAA is not allowed in any country to fly anywhere except to land at the international airport of that country, period. So SAA can't take people to Dubai and proceed to, what's that other place where there is a Grand Prix? Abu Dhabi, yes. So SAA can't take people to Dubai and proceed and pick others up in Dubai and drop them off in Abu Dhabi, and whilst at it, decide that, we can also go to another country. It's not allowed. It's not allowed to land at Heathrow and proceed to Manchester. It's not allowed. But no, not us. You can do what you want. You can actually land people at Nazareth if you want. You have the Department of Home Affairs passing visa regulations. You have the Department of Tourism raising a red flag. There has to be a way of coordinating this. But having said that, municipalities must pay for their water bills, really. Because coordination doesn't mean that those who don't pay must be allowed not to pay. Somebody has to foot this bill, this debt. And it surely is not going to be me. So my point is clear. You owe the Department of Water Affairs, pay them. And if you don't pay them, the Department of Water Affairs must implement all debt collection measures they have at their disposal so that they have the revenue we need. Because right now, if you look at our government finances, a great deal of those finances are composed of debt to state-owned companies, debt by state-owned companies and other government departments to other government departments, composed of fruitless, wasteful, irregular, and unauthorized expenditure. If we dealt with all of those things, perhaps our revenue shortfall would not be as high as it is. We would be having a bit of breathing space. So I think we need to become coordination. I think the point you are making is that coordination means that the institution must function. Those who receive services must pay for the services. Those who must collect their debts must collect their debts. So that at the end, when I, as a citizen, pay for my water bills or my electricity bills, and the municipality does not transfer the payment to ESCOM or to the water trading entity, it is not me who gets punished by having my water and electricity switched off, but the matter is resolved simply by the payments that are being completed. So that is quite important, and an important point in the coordination. Colin, I'm not going to comment on what you were saying. I appreciate your comments and the suggestions you are making. And we will continue to work together in the CEO's initiative to drive the growth in the economy. Policy uncertainty, that too could become a problem. That too could become a problem. But at times, I think the examples that we use can be interesting, because it's not that right at the outset, but let me not get into the specific of the issues because they affect me, and I would like to argue. Let me say the point of principle being made is that ANC and government policy need to be aligned too. And that again is the responsibility not of all of us additional members of the NEC, because we are all equals. Sometimes we can't give one another instructions, but the leadership, and the policy leadership of the ANC and of government is the presidents. They need to provide that leadership that resolves those issues. And I think that after 2007, we emasculated the presidency of the ANC. And I think we made a mistake because we took away its capacity to coordinate various aspects of ANC policy and alignment between ANC and government to ensure that there is alignment and smooth implementation of policies in that regard. But I think you are absolutely correct. But the policies, the uncertainty we are talking about, when we talk in our lexicon, we're talking about your telecommunications policies, your mining policies, your energy policies. We're talking about your SOE reforms. But I think you are adding an important point of ensuring that government and the ANC align their policies before they are even taken further, so that you don't get at the level, because government would have better resources to investigate and research many aspects of policies that the ANC as a party may not have. And so it becomes important that when government has done that, we who are deployees are able to share those with the ANC so that we can align and once decisions are taken, we are able to move forward.